everyone, and welcome to Unregulated Leadership. My name is Lavonya Douglas, and we have Latoya. Let's start all over because I did it wrong.
Yeah, we'll run it. Sarah will edit.
Hey, hello, everyone. Welcome to Unregulated Leadership. We are your hosts, Lavonya Douglas
and Latoya Johnson, and we're all in here today with Dr. Jennifer Card. Jen, it's great to see you. We started in the same cohort, and I very much appreciate you coming on to talk about your research and your journey in the program. So introduce yourself to the people.
Well, thank you for having me this morning, lovely ladies. And it's a pleasure to be here and see your face, Latoya. I miss you. So I'm Dr. Jennifer Card. I graduated the leadership psychology program this past December. I've been working throughout my program and prior to my program as an executive coach, focusing on sort of C-suite, but I also do individual coaching, team coaching, and I'm also involved in some leadership research at the moment. I just can't seem to keep my hands away from school. And so my job is quite varied, actually, what I do. As I said, I coach at the individual level, I coach at the team level, I develop workshops to see kind of the pain points of what organizations need. I also help teams, especially during this hybrid space right now, come back together and understand how important it is to be in the office at times, to be those meaningful inputs and water cooler talks. And I'm also finishing up my first book, which will be released in the fall. And that's titled Equinamini for Leaders.
Awesome. We are excited to talk about all of it. Mm-hmm. But first, tell us why leadership? Why the leadership psychology program?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think my path to this was a winding road. I graduated with a master's in coaching psychology and positive psychology, and I was coaching. And what I realized is that leadership is such a sticky topic. There are so many different facets to it. It's a complicated, complex topic, especially in these days of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I was asking myself, how can I be better equipped myself as a coach to help these leaders navigate the future? And I've also have a huge passion for psychology. And when I was looking online, I came across this program. And at the time, and it may still be the case, it was the only program that really took organizational psychology and focused in on the leader. And so it really was a marry of my two favorite topics, which was leadership and psychology. And it was the only one in the world that I could find. I live in Bermuda. So at the time, being present on campus wasn't a reality for me all the time. I have 2 teenage kids. So it was but I still wanted time with my cohort members as well. So they really found a nice balance, this program, between synchronous and asynchronous learning. So it really all made sense for me. And when I reached out to the school, not having known the school prior, I really felt that William James College sort of has its head on straight. I think it has its values in place and what are needed for the future. And it's really courageous to dig into some of the heavier topics that we need to dig into, especially to help leaders to do the same.
I love that. I'm super interested to hear more about the coaching.
Yeah.
What is your, because you were coaching before you came to William James. So did your coaching style change after you left, or is it the same? Is it just enhanced?
That's a great question. It definitely has expanded, and thank you for helping me reflect on that. So coming into the program, I was accredited with the ICF. I have the master's in coaching psychology, and I think it's really helped me to better understand what it means to be a leader. And I think that will definitely helps me to ask the right questions. It helps me to be more courageous as a coach as well, because I help leaders to find more work-life boundaries, which is probably one of the biggest topics right now. But William James also opened me up, and the program also opened me up to my love of team coaching. And I didn't realize that I had this passion prior to the program. And I remember we studied teaming, and I didn't understand that there was such a framework that I could provide to help people and teams to be tighter and to come together and onboard better together. And it was really this program that opened my eyes up to that. I think there's a really strong ethical understanding in our relationship And that also helped me to, I think, ground my practice even more as well as a coach. So I've actually moved. I do individual coaching, but I'm really focusing now on team coaching and group coaching. And that was William James' input for that, for sure.
What would you say are the biggest like challenges between individual coaching versus team coaching? We had a guest earlier who had a strong psychology background and that they were practicing clinician, and they talked about, like, you know, trying to make that switch and it being like a bit of a challenge, and that, like, when you're working one-on-one, it's, you know, diagnose, make a plan, move forward. But with teams, there's sometimes the individual diagnoses don't necessarily all the time align with trying to make a group plan, right? So what would you say are some of the biggest challenges?
It's a great question. And I think holding the space for multiple people is the way that I can describe it. So holding the space for one individual has its own level of dynamics, maybe a little more intense, but that individual to kind of hold that space for what they need in that moment. But holding the space for a group and a team, I guess it takes a lot of concentration. You really have to be paying attention to everybody, but you also have to understand, what are they working on? What are they working towards in that moment? So from an individual level, you're probably working on one of the things that's always, and I think should be, self-awareness. Who am I? And the thing I love about group coaching, it's also about other awareness. And that's so important for diversity, equity, inclusion. It's important for psychological safety. So it's not just at that point, it's also working with how they work together. How does that individual respect their authentic way of being and still be able to navigate communication effectively? Some people are very open and easy with communication. Some people tend to take a little time to process that. And so my job as a coach with a team is to actually help them to respect the fact everybody arrives to that team with, like, icebergs, if you will, different stories, and even bring their values to the table, but to understand how each other communicates, what working styles they choose. And it takes a lot of self-awareness to finally go, maybe my working style isn't the only working style. Maybe if I allow space for people to show up in a different way, I may actually learn something or provide space for even me to expand my understanding of myself. So I think that would probably be the greatest difference, is that other awareness that has to happen in a team coaching setting. Not everybody enjoys team coaching. And I think, it's okay also if you find yourself where you're like, actually, my calling is truly just individual coaching. And some people is more team coaching, and that's okay to respect that within yourself, because I think there's a need in organizations for both.
I love the concept of team coaching because there's so many organizations where you have to work in a team. Do you find yourself working with people's strengths or developing in areas that they're not strong in when you're doing team coaching?
Yeah, I love your question. And I think the positive psychologist in me, I'm always looking at, say, hey, work with what you have. It's not to say don't be aware of what maybe an area that you need to develop out further, or maybe an area you just want to let go of because somebody else on the team may be strong in that. And that's what I love about team coaching too. And I'm also certified in Berkman. So we'll do an assessment sometimes first at the individual level. Then we can map out on a sort of a grid where everybody is and understand who's stronger in one area. Some people may love to dig in the weeds and be more analytical. It's okay if that's not your strength. Hopefully you've developed out a team as a leader that has someone who's actually super strong in that area. And so it's one of the great things about team coaches and helping people be aware that they don't have to be everything to everybody, but they have to learn who they are as they kind of show up. So, yeah.
Because I think, leaders sometimes don't always understand that concept, right? And so you'll have a leader, you're creating this, you're doing this team coaching, but you have a leader that's like, well, no, everyone needs to do the same thing. Everyone needs to be on the same page. We're all equal. And so you need to be able to write like this person writes. But being able to be like, no, that's not necessarily the best way. Let's focus on what people are good at, because that person that you're going to put in this place to write this 10-page research paper can find you 20 clients while this other person doesn't want to talk to people. And then they can write this paper in an hour, right? And so helping leaders to be able to focus on people's strengths and not like it has to be equal.
I agree. And I think that's part of the onboarding process that has to happen truly and meaningfully, where you actually come together, figure out whose strengths are what, and also what people get energy from, what aspect of their work. It's not to say that every aspect of your job is going to be perfectly energizing. We all have about 20% that's, super boring and repetitive, but to figure out who's going to show up and let their light shine in that. And I think, to your point, leaders have to do the same with themselves, because I think they're the old school version of a leader is I have to be an expert, especially a fresh leader coming in. Sometimes that sort of imposter syndrome kicks in and they're like, I have to make sure that I'm seen as the expert. It's like absolutely opposite these days. It's like, show up authentic, figure out that you're a good learner, lean into members of your team if they're maybe better at something, and not be afraid to actually acknowledge that and let them take the lead on that. And I love this idea. One of the concepts, and you probably both have covered this too in your own studies, is that self-directed working groups. In a perfect world, I love that idea that people will actually come together and figure out together collectively what piece of the puzzle they want to take on, what piece of the puzzle they need to work on as a team on. And it doesn't always work that way. I appreciate that, especially under pressure, but I love this idea of that being a possibility.
Absolutely. So Jen, I can't help but notice your background, and that you say a few words a little different from us US folks. And so I'm going to highlight for our listeners that you are living in Bermuda and are originally Canadian. And do those two different cultures influence your practice at all?
Wow. Okay. Great question too. Yes. And it was interesting to be a student because William James is surprisingly international. Right. And I love that because one of the topics, as you both know well, is that we cover cultural intelligence. And I think being able to have these in-depth discussions, slightly different lenses. And I think it was, if I remember, maybe you ladies can correct me, is it Hofstede's research that shows the different behaviors of different countries around the world? I think it's Hofstede.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that that's so important to remember because most teams nowadays are global. And if they're not global, you're working with a team where members are still globally minded because maybe they weren't born in the same country as you. And to be able to understand that even decision-making and judgment and values sometimes are a little bit different and respect those. And so as so I think Bermuda is slightly different. It's more of a collectivist society. And that's from the Hofstede research, where when I first moved here, I had that North American, if I was walking in the store, I was going to ask for what I needed politely, but walk in and ask for what I needed. When I realized is in Bermuda, I have to slow it down and I have to, the conversation has to be at the personal level first. How was your day? And then I can lead into actually what my needs are. And that was an adjustment on my part that had to happen for sure. But I find, Canada and the US are pretty similar in the way that we approach our learning, decision-making, coming together. But yes, some of my words are quite colloquial.
I'm so glad you brought up the international piece because my concentration is Caribbean and African mental health. And my God, it is night and day from American culture, right? And it's like when you immerse yourself in a different culture, you see like the things, the way you communicate is completely different. So going into organizations where you just show up as yourself and you're showing up as your authentic self is disrespectful in that culture. And unless you do the research before going in to figure out what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, you're not going to be effective in your delivering whatever, whether you're presenting information or you're doing training, because they're not receptive to your authentic US self. So I think I feel like we have to find more ways to have more conversations because the world is so big. And if you have people from multiple countries working for one organization, everyone sees respect differently. Everyone sees engagement differently. And I don't know, as I'm talking, I feel like we need to create a course or something like somehow to even how to research these different countries, or what do you do when you hire someone from Sri Lanka and then you hire someone from Senegal? Like what is the how do you bring everyone together to work together collectively for this common good, but still respecting their individual cultures?
You know what? It's such a great point. And first of all, I think I applaud you for your topic. I think mental health in the Caribbean is an underserviced market. And I think more research and support needs to happen. Absolutely. And I agree. And I think one of the things that I've learned throughout this program is that it's sometimes, and first of all, I think trust is not a given thing. Like, I think we have to shed that trust is something that has to be slightly earned. And that's how you show up as yourself, how you give space for the other person to show up. And so to kind of focus on earning that trust of the individual. And that's a lot of self-awareness work and learning out your own biases, your inferences and things like that. But I really think that slowing down in order to speed up is an important thing when you're meeting new people. And understanding that you're coming together as a bunch of icebergs floating on this great big sea of life. We have shared needs and drives and desires, but we also have very different stories. And some of that stories could involve trauma. And I think we have to be, let the other person kind of slow down and let that person come to that space in a comfortable manner so that you don't rush in and assume trust right away.
Yeah.
So I like your point, definitely. Yeah.
You gave us a quote because we're making t-shirts in our minds. We haven't made one yet. But you said everyone, we need to slow down before we speed up. I love that. I love that.
I actually keep a little turtle. I actually don't have it right here around me because as Latoya knows, it's like, Jen moves fast. And one of the things I've had to learn through all this group reflection work is to slow down. And so I keep a little turtle as my reminder. It's like, it's to don't jump in as the fast bunny.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So switching gears just a little bit, Jen, I want to talk with you about your research, which focused on executive leadership development, stress resiliency, and mind well-being, right? So tell us what you learned.
Oh, wow. What did I learn? Well, I think I learned the first thing that I wanted to share is when I went into this idea at the very beginning of my program, as did many of our cohort members. And what surprised me is that we carried that same topic all the way to the end. Most of us didn't stray from that particular topic. So it would surprise me that I went in wanting to know more about leader well-being, mind well-being, and that led me to psychological self-care, a program that I developed, which I'm now doing a research study out of Northeastern with. And it stuck with me the whole way. So I realized that that's actually part of my true calling, if you will. I never got bored of the topic. The other thing that I learned is every time I turned over a research rock, and I'm sure you both see this too, it opened up a whole plethora of other people who are out there. And it was humbling. Here I was rushing in with this fresh idea and I was like, oh, these people have done some tremendous research, but then kind of settling because I realized that there's a whole community interested in the same topic. So doing the dissertation really helped me to uncover that, to learn that there are so many other people that I can learn from. So that was a huge takeaway. Then topically, I think what I learned was that I started out with this big, huge, broad project. And, I was trying to boil the ocean. That's that colloquial term, and I realized that I had to hone it down to something that was meaningful and that would be practical and applicable for leaders. So I really simplified it. So that was a learning too, to simplify it as much as possible topically. And then to always ground it in research. And so I developed this psychological self-care model because what essentially I learned was that people know how to physically take care of themselves, whether they do it or not, whether they're capable of doing it or not, whether the resources to do it or not, or the reality in their world, to sleep right, eat right, exercise, and time is that precious. Do we have time in our lives? But I realized that I think people proactively don't know how to psychologically self-care as well. And so if that's the one thing that I can help people to understand how to do is to take that 5-10 minutes a day, because it isn't a trip to a spa that's going to resolve all of our, stress levels and things like that. We have to take care of our minds the same way we take care of our bodies. And that's like a little bit every day, a drop in the bucket, however that is. And if that's the one thing, I realized A, the research, that was the gap in the research, and B, how can I help leaders to do it in a way that's meaningful for their time boundaries?
How do you get the message out?
Well, hopefully my book. It's a great question too. So I subcontract for another company, and I think that I just had to keep pushing pushing that story. Like every time a workshop showed up and we were developing a workshop, I was like, how's their stress level? How are they feeling? Oh, they're fine. No, leaders actually tend to not want to talk about stress. They kind of want to wash over that because they're on the, they're on the treadmill, they're running, they're going. And it's, that slowing down again. It's like, no, I have to carry a bit of this in every story and check in with them to see how they're actually doing, truly doing.
Oh God. I think about some of my leaders and like the stress level that they have. And it's almost like they don't want to talk about it because they don't know how to change it. Right. And they think 5 to 10 minutes is just way too much time. And it's like, that 5 to 10 minutes can change your whole day. Like, give yourself some space and some grace to focus on yourself so that your people can be greater. And, I feel like, hopefully your book does like shed some light on that, because it is so, so important. And so even culturally, there's so many people that's like, we're going to work. And it's like, well, no, you need to rest. You need to take a break. You need to, there's no break time. And it's like, because that is their culture. They're almost offended that you are telling them to slow down. It's like, no, you're lazy. It's like, no. I just learned how to create boundaries, and I'm trying to help you do that too. So finding that balance, even working internationally to.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think it's a story that has to be unearthed and turned on its head. Because I think the old story of the leader was like, work till you, drop in, type A behavior. And people are realizing that facing the uncertainty and complexity of the world that we have now, you have to come with resources and ready and to be able to navigate that. Otherwise, you've got nothing to give.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's powerful about this program is that we can offer the research that supports why it actually, it's not me saying this, it's not my opinion. The research says you need to let your mind rest. There's the attention restorative therapy. You need to go out in nature 10 minutes a day, turn off your cell phone. The research says this will actually impact your blood pressure and everything else that will then help you to become a better performer and a healthier person.
What's that research? I'm taking it.
Yeah. One of them's Kaplan. And you know what? Kaplan and Kaplan, I don't know if it's a husband and wife or, brothers or related somehow or sisters. And this was ART, attention restorative therapy. And it was back in 1995, they started this research, and they're still showing up in the research today that even 10 minutes are like cognitive. We actually need to let our minds wander in nature. And if we can do that, we can come back to our desks and have better focus and concentration.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'll look that up.
So Jen, we don't want you to give away the book, but we'd like a little teaser, if you will. Tell us, and I, for whatever reason, am struggling with saying equanimity.
It's a hard one, and I worry that I'm going to trip over it too. Yeah, so equanimity. So what I found was that when I developed this psychological self-care program, which is 5 to 10 minutes a day to just kind of work on our minds as we work on our bodies, because it's all correlated. I thought, what are some of the outcomes? There's that researcher mind. It's like, what are some of the outcomes? And I thought, and I dug into the research, and I used to be a yoga instructor as well. So I'm interested in the topic of equanimity. And the general historical version of equanimity is that we can remain calm and composed, even in times of turmoil. And I thought, okay, so what's a modern day contemporary version of that? Because it's in reality, we're going to get rocked, especially with all this uncertainty. And I actually then went back historically to Marcus Aurelius and AD, like literally he's a Stoic philosopher. And he was saying it wasn't necessarily about being calm and composed all the time. It was about our ability to right ourselves when we get rocked. I thought that actually resonates more with me, because the reality is we're all going to get rocked by certain things. And it's but how we right ourselves. And the more that we focus on righting ourselves in terms of getting ourselves grounded again and resetting, the better we'll become at it. So that's how I kind of thought, well, this is potentially one of the outcomes from developing this psychological well-being, is we have more of a space between what triggers us, that we can be more intentional, and we can kind of know how to reset ourselves when we need to reset ourselves. And so one of the studies I'm doing right now is to actually test this model. And there's equanimity scales that people actually can measure their level of equanimity pre and post. So I'm hopeful, but it's going to be what it's going to be, I guess, in this particular outcome. So yeah.
That's super exciting. Super exciting. I expected nothing but greatness from you, Dr. Card, when
Oh,
we
you're very
started,
sweet.
and I look forward to reading the book when it comes.
I look forward to your dissertation when it's in the home stretch too.
Yes.
So I'm really looking forward to both of yours. Yeah.
So we want to give you the last word. We know that you've dropped a lot of gems here in our short time together, but what do you want people to know, whether that be about your practice as a coach, your research, your love of OD, the work that you do, or what they should be inquiring about in terms of leadership?
Wow. Okay. So many things. So I guess on a environmental level, I have to say that I give huge kudos to William James College. I was doing my practice at the same time as going to school, and there was never a moment where I wasn't reading something that was absolutely relevant and contemporary to meet what was out there in the system, whether it was working at the organizational level, team level, individual level. I'm so thankful for that learning. I'm also thankful that William James is having the courage to actually dig into the heavier topics that need to be looked at. And hey, not perfect, right? But they are actually looking at it and helping leaders of the future to actually be vulnerable and show up and think about the diversity, equity pipeline and all the things all the work that has to do. So that I want to leave that nugget out there, that I'm very proud to be part of this community. And then from my practice is that, I guess from a leader perspective, is that maybe that slowing down to speed up, that leaders need to give themselves space on their calendars. I wrote a LinkedIn post the other day that they have to aerate their calendars to let the oxygen in. They're just slammed. Their calendars are slammed, and that is the old way. The new way is we have to find that balance, and we have to take care of ourselves, and we'll show up better as our best selves when we actually give ourselves a little bit of breathing room. And then also to focus on the other. When you're doing teamwork, don't assume that others are going to have the same working behaviors, the same ways of dealing conflict, the same ways of take time to get to know them, let them get to know you as well. You'll just work better as a team, and the psychological safety will be increased at that point. So I guess that's what came to mind right now. I probably could go on and on, but I'll leave it at that.
No, I love that.
Thank you. We'll be sure to invite you back after the book drops.
Yay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I would love to come back.
I can't wait to come to Bermuda and
please let me know when you land.